Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the S&T Football Podcast. I am your man, Say, and today we're going to be talking about all the different things going on in the NFL world and free agency, the beginning of the offseason. We've had quite a start to the beginning of the offseason, a lot of moves being made, a lot of players switching the logos on their helmets, joining new teams, trades, free agency, the draft coming up as well. A lot of things going on in the NFL world peak right now. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the crazy headlines we've been seeing around the NFL world lately. So let's talk about Kyler Murray, the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, signing a one-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. So this was a debated conversation going into the offseason, what the Vikings were going to do at the quarterback spot. We know from the last offseason that they made some moves. They let go of Sam Darnold, who won them 14 games last year, got them the number 5 seed, and they ended up losing in the first round. He goes over to the Seahawks and obviously wins a Super Bowl this past season with them. Meanwhile, the Vikings basically returned back to the bottom of the NFC North, and J.J. McCarthy, who was supposed to be their guy, who they drafted a couple years ago in the draft, very high in the first round. He has not lived up to the expectations. The first year, he was kind of a redshirt year for him. He was injured in the preseason game, and he ended up having that season-ending injury. So, he didn't play at all that first year. So, we had to, we had to give him some grace. We had to give him some grace around that situation because of his injury. However, this past season, when he was given the reins and he had full control over the offense, he did not perform well. Now, that being said, technically this past season was his rookie year. If you think about it, it was his first full year playing football in the NFL. So, it could be very early to be giving up on him. I understand. And I don't think the Vikings are giving up on him. I just think that bringing over Kyler Murray, kind of a bridge quarterback, maybe to give JJ a little bit more time to develop, give him more time to get adjusted at the NFL level so that eventually he can become that guy that they thought he was going to be when they drafted him. But on the other side, for Kyler Murray, the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, he has been for the past several years now, coming out of Oklahoma. Shout out Boomer Sooner. Coming out of Oklahoma, he was drafted number 1 overall. And since then, it's kind of been up and down for him in Arizona. As we know, the Arizona Cardinals have been a struggling franchise for quite some time now. So, it's not anything out of their normal to be, struggling in the NFC West. But Kyler Murray, it did start off well his career in Arizona. I remember they made the playoffs either his first or second year in the NFL, and they ended up losing in the first round. Kyler Murray is an interesting topic because, when you think about Kyler Murray, like we all know he's very talented. He's a very talented quarterback, and he has proven that he can play at the NFL level, even with being the size that he is, being a very small stature for an NFL quarterback. But he has proven that he can play at that highest level. But he's very inconsistent in his playing level. He has dealt with injuries over his career. There was also some interesting off the field concerns regarding maybe Call of Duty addiction. I remember those stories a couple years ago. Y'all probably remember that. So just been an interesting career for him. But obviously he's been the guy at Arizona for the past several years. He is the guy there. And he, when you think about him in ranks as regard to NFL quarterbacks, like we don't really think of Kyler Murray as like, the top notch quarterbacks, but he's also definitely not at the bottom. That's for sure. Probably somewhere in the middle, somewhere around, that 16, 17, 15 range, 18, whatever you want to call it. Probably middle of the pack when it comes to the NFL QB realms. But I think this is a great opportunity for Kyler Murray to come over to a new team, start fresh, and kind of be a change for the Vikings that they need. Because right now, J.J. McCarthy is not it. Also, need to mention that even though Kyler Murray signed with the Vikings, Justin Jefferson has also now officially submitted a trade request. So that's a little unfortunate because obviously Justin Jefferson is the Minnesota Vikings best player. He is arguably the best receiver in the NFL on the Vikings. So if he leaves, then that obviously kind of spoils the whole Kyler Murray arrival. You would think that if for any hope for Minnesota to have this season, they're going to need Kyler Murray and they're going to need Justin Jefferson catching the ball from him. So that's not good. Hopefully they can convince Justin Jefferson to stay around and get excited about playing with Kyler Murray. I don't blame Justin Jefferson at all. The past several years for him have probably been torture. You're literally the best receiver in the NFL, yet you're playing for a underwhelming franchise, an underperforming franchise. Given that they did win 14 games last season, and that was probably a pretty good year for everybody, but they also immediately lost in the first round of playoffs. So, all that being said, I don't blame Justin Jefferson for wanting to leave. I actually am surprised he didn't ask sooner. Probably he was trying to secure that money, that big money. But I'm surprised he didn't want to leave sooner because, like, you are wasting your career away in Minnesota. Kind of like a Saquon Barkley in New York or a Calvin Johnson in Detroit or what have you. But yeah, kind of that kind of situation for Justin Jefferson. So if I were him, though, I would be very excited about playing with Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray could definitely be a very big change for the Vikings and kind of have them on the up and ups. Because really, that's all they're missing is some really good quarterback play. Now, they do have some other issues here and there, just like every other team. But really, when the Vikings have a good quarterback, the coach Kevin O'Connell, he's seen as a quarterback whisperer. He's the one that fixed Sam Darnold. He's the one that had Josh Dobbs playing, unbelievable football for a little bit. He's the one that had Kirk Cousins playing at his absolute best. So Kevin O'Connell, I think, can work with the talents that Kyler Murray has. It's just that whether they can put the other pieces together and finally make a run. So we'll see for the Vikings, but I think they have some hope with that Kyler Murray addition. Moving on, so let's talk about the Patriots. The Patriots obviously lost the Super Bowl to the Seahawks a couple months ago. They signed Romeo Doubs, receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He comes over to New England and basically kind of fills a void because it was a very interesting situation going on with the Patriots. Stephon Diggs, obviously, we all know who Stephon Diggs is. Most of us are aware of the kind of lifestyle that he's living on outside of the field. I think he's expecting 4 kids in just this past year or calendar year, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So he's a wild boy, but he came over to the Patriots last offseason and he became their number one receiver this past season. I believe he caught twice as many yards as the next second best receiver for the New England Patriots. That's how much of a huge addition he was to this offense. The Patriots offense was starving for any kind of talent on the outside, any kind of star power deep down the field. And Stephon Diggs came over and provided that for them that past season. And as you saw, that elevated the Patriots from winning 4 games a season to making the Super Bowl. So obviously Stephon Diggs was a huge part of that. Unfortunately, Stephon Diggs has some extracurricular activities that he likes to participate in off the field that does affect his NFL career, as we've seen in the past, going from the Vikings to the Bills to was there another team in between? The Texans. Yeah, he was on the Texans for a year, and then now he's on the Patriots.
And even though he was able to overcome that on the field, now with more things coming out, and now he's in court right now. He's fighting a case and things like that. The Patriots have released him. It has basically become too much for them to bear. So even though the Patriots were in desperate need of wide receiver talent, and that's why they got Stephon Diggs in the first place, and then they saw the benefits from doing that, that was not enough for them to be able to move forward with Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs has some very interesting things going on, as we talked about, and it's probably coming to the end of the road for him. It's kind of, we've seen that story before, Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Terrell Owens, guys like that. It's kind of the story of the diva wide receiver in the NFL. So he seems to be coming to his end, but I'm sure he'll get picked up somewhere. But the Patriots let him go, even though that he was a huge part of their success last season. Well, this signing with Romeo Doubs replaces him pretty well. I would say Stephon Diggs is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL for the past few years. He is that A-level type wide receiver. Romeo Doubs like a B-level type, but I think that Romeo Doubs can fill in his shoes very well. I think Romeo Doubs can lead this wide receiver core in New England. Romeo Doubs is a very solid receiver, and he is going to the New England Patriots. Patriots are signing Romeo Doubs to a 4-year, $70 million contract to become their number one. Very good signing for the Patriots. The Patriots obviously are known for not having a lot of talent in the wide receiver room. They have gone years and years with having very low-level talent in the receiving core, guys that would not be starting on other on other teams, would not be the number one, number two in other teams. You know, the white guy from Walmart, prototype, the 5'9", 180 wide receiver, the slot guy. You know, the Patriots have always just made it work by kind of having these, like I don't want to say they're not talented. Obviously they're talented. They're in the NFL, but just like low level NFL talent. They've always seemed to make it work. They just elevate it with the quarterback play. Like I said before, the wide receivers in New England are not, the best of the best when it comes to the NFL. So he's going to fit right in. He did very well for himself in Green Bay, and I think that he will match with Drake May in New England very well as well. So pretty cool signing to see right there too. And we'll see how he performs in New England next season. Moving on to Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco, the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs for the last few years, won a Super Bowl or possibly two Super Bowls, obviously been to multiple Super Bowls with the Chiefs ever since he came out of Rutgers as the running back, and he is a very good running back for the Chiefs. He has been a star for them over the past few seasons, a dynamic guy, a tough runner. He seems to always keep his feet moving. His feet never stop. He just keeps pushing, keeps moving forward, and he's a very tough running back to tackle. Well, he is moving on from the Chiefs. He is going to the Lions. The Lions are signing him to a 1-year, $1.81 million deal. I think that's a very good move for him. I mean, he's going from a Super Bowl contender to another Super Bowl contender. The Lions have been right there when it comes to the Super Bowl contention the past few years as well, and not a downgrade for him at all, I would think, especially with the Chiefs kind of coming back down to earth this past season and missing the playoffs. He's now going to a team that should be right back in the playoff conversation next season, especially with him on the team. And I really like this move because the Lions, as we're going to talk about next, traded David Montgomery to the Texans. So the Lions split up their dynamic duo in the backfield, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who has led the Lions backfield for the past few years. One of the probably the best running back tandem in the NFL. I don't know if you can name a better two running back punch better than what the Lions have had the past few years. Has done wonders for them and has elevated the Lions to levels that we have not seen in decades, obviously. It was a really interesting move to see the Lions trade Montgomery to the Texans. I thought that was really interesting because I was like, why would you break that up? Why would you break up one of the best backfields in the NFL like that, especially trade it to the Texans, who could be a team that could be contending on the other side in the AFC? Well, they did good for themselves replacing David Montgomery with Isaiah Pacheco. So I think that's a very good replacement for one reason, because Isaiah Pacheco is younger than David Montgomery. David Montgomery is starting to get up there in age a little bit. So they got younger, they got cheaper, and both of those guys are kind of, similar running styles. David Montgomery is kind of the power running back in that backfield for the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs is more of the speed. Isaiah Pacheco is that power. So you're replacing power with power, and now Isaiah Pacheco and Jahmyr Gibbs will now match up in the backfield. It's going to be a dreadhead, a dynamic backfield for the Detroit Lions. So that's a very interesting signing as well. I really like that for the Lions, and they should be right back in contention next season as well. I think that was a very good move for them to stay right where they have been for the past couple years. And like I said, on that note, David Montgomery goes to the Texans. The Lions traded him to the Texans for offensive lineman Juice Scruggs and 2 draft picks as well. So the Lions, I guess they probably had this in mind because they didn't get too much back. They got an O lineman, which I bet, is probably good for them up front. But the late round draft picks that they got, I don't know if they're worth, a guy like David Montgomery, who has proved to be one of the better running backs in the NFL, I believe, for the past few years. And it must have been a plan for them to trade away a aging player like him and get younger and get Isaiah Pacheco. And I don't think Loss dropped at all talent-wise. I think both those guys are pretty similar talent-wise. I think Isaiah Pacheco is a very good running back as well. So I think that's why the Lions were willing to make this move. And on the other side, for the Houston Texans, that was a very good move for them as well because, they do have Joe Mixon. I think they still do have Joe Mixon, but Joe Mixon, just like David Montgomery, is starting to get up there in age a little bit. So they go ahead and get David Montgomery to pair with him. And now the Texans are going to be having a very good backfield as well next season with both those guys. Oh, and plus the Texans signed Nick Chubb as well, who made a couple nice plays for them last season. during their path to the playoffs. I think the Texans are kind of putting these three guys together, these three old aging players together, but kind of the trying to get remaining gas that all these guys have left in their careers as they're all probably getting up there in age a little bit. Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, and David Montgomery. But hey, those are three big names right there being on the same team. So the Houston Texans continue to swing hard. The Houston Texans have been swinging hard for the past couple years now, trying to get a Super Bowl trophy, their first in franchise history. They've made some really big, bold moves, and it has paid off for them. They have made the playoffs for the last like 4 or 5 years straight, and they are just on the brink of getting over that hump and getting to a Super Bowl conversation. So watch out for the Houston Texans. They're not going anywhere. Geno Smith to the Jets. So Geno Smith returns to his original team that drafted Geno Smith coming out of college, probably a decade and a half ago out of West Virginia. Geno Smith returns to the Jets after kind of a disastrous year last year with the Raiders. Pretty disastrous. It did not go well at all. And I kind of feel bad for Geno because anybody who's followed Geno's career with the Jets originally, it did not work out. So he kind of looked like a draft bust coming out of West Virginia. But then he went to the Seahawks and he was a backup for a while. And then he finally got his shot after like several years of being a backup. And all of a sudden he was playing like, I don't want to say MVP type football. He was playing all pro bowl level type football for a couple years after being a backup for like a decade, almost a decade, and basically being a career backup written off like he talked about. And then he comes back and he takes the Seahawks to the playoffs for like a year or two, and he kind of resurrects his career. Well, last year he goes to the Raiders. The Seahawks moved on from him, so he goes to the Raiders, and they kind of thought he could be that bridge guy coming out of Seattle and having a couple good years under his belt. Well, last year it did not go well at all. The Raiders had a terrible year, and Geno Smith was not an exception to that. It did not play well, and the Raiders obviously are blowing everything up this offseason, getting ready to draft number one overall, having the worst record in the NFL. So, Geno Smith booted from the Raiders, and now he returns to the Jets, the team that drafted him originally. He's 35 now. He signs with them. And it's kind of like it's kind of like a feel good story, I would say, for him. It's kind of like a feel good story for Geno Smith. Nothing really to see here. He's probably playing out the last few years of his career. We'll see if he ends it with the Jets, but the Jets obviously are having their own troubles for quite a long time now. The Jets are right in the same boat with the Raiders, so he is not upgrading team-wise at all. He definitely misses playing with the Seahawks, I would bet. Going from the Raiders to the Jets, I mean, that's just as bad as it gets. Those are probably the two worst teams in the NFL right now, if you had to point your finger at two teams. So, I don't think much is going to happen with the Jets next season. It's probably just, another bridge season for him as the Jets get ready to draft a guy. The Jets will probably draft a guy this year. We'll see, but maybe they're getting ready for next year and waiting on Arch Manning out of Texas. But nothing really to see here. Just a feel good story. Geno Smith going back to his original team, but the Jets will probably still be the Jets next season. Mike Evans. Mike Evans, the longtime Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver, is signing with the San Francisco 49ers. This is probably one of the biggest surprising moves I saw over the offseason for two reasons, I would say here. One, just because Mike Evans has spent his entire career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ever since being drafted out of Texas A&M. Mike Evans is really getting up there. I mean, he's 32, but for a wide receiver in the NFL that is getting up there, he is a pretty old guy for a wide receiver now. And I was starting to think that his career was kind of dwindling down. I didn't think he had many years left in him. He's battled injuries for a long time. He's battled injuries year after year after year. He has struggled to stay on the field and stay healthy. Now, when he is healthy, he is one of the better wide receivers that we have seen in the NFL. I would say at this point of all time, like this guy has done it so consistently for so long that it's like he is up there with the all-time greats for sure at this point, I would say. My only surprise is that I didn't think he had much left in him. Well, Mike Evans said, hey, the Buccaneers finally think that I don't have nothing left in the tank. Okay, let me show you. I'm going to go over to the 49ers and sign a 3-year deal with them for $60 million. Wow. At 32 years old, when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the only team that's seen him, the team that signed him again and again and again and kept him around for years and years and years, finally said, hey, man, you're getting up there. We're going to move on from you now. But he's not giving up. He's going over to the 49ers, who are just as much a Super Bowl contender as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's becoming basically their number one, which I really think is a very good move for the 49ers because of the controversy that the 49ers have faced over the past couple years with their wide receiver and I guess you would say running back talent, all of their talent on the outside. There's been a lot of things going on with them. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, even like on his name, the guy they drafted out of Florida a couple years ago who was shot in San Francisco. He got shot and he was basically out for like the first half of his rookie year. Yeah, the 49ers have had a tough time keeping their talent on the field, especially with Christian McCaffrey, and his injury battles and things like that. So Brandon Ayuk basically disappeared. Like Brandon Ayuk was probably one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and then all of a sudden there was trade talks because he was unhappy with his contract, and then basically he just stopped playing. He just basically stopped playing. He was so adamant about getting his contract and getting what he wanted that he basically just stopped playing. And I guess the way things went down, that no other team wanted to take him away either or sign him either. So he basically has not played for like the past couple years, and that's one of the more bizarre stories in the NFL right there. Brandon Ayuk. So Brandon Ayuk disappears for the 49ers. They trade Deebo Samuel to the Commanders last season. So Deebo Samuel's gone. Brandon Ayuk is gone. Christian McCaffrey can barely stay on the field. George Kittle has his own injury problems. So, yeah, the 49ers have just struggled to keep their talent on the field, even though they still have performed very well. Even last season, still performed very well last season as well. But they're not going to be able to keep this up for too much longer. Just the way things have gone, they have struggled to keep their talent together. So this is a very good move for them, going outside and finding one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, and Mike Evans. I think that's a very good move for them, and I think that will pay them dividends this upcoming season. Minka Fitzpatrick is also going to the Jets, so the Jets taking in Minka Fitzpatrick as well. Minka Fitzpatrick has had an interesting past few years. Ever since he originally left the Steelers, it's kind of been downhill for him. He went to the Dolphins, which was not the best move for him. The Dolphins thought they were making a splash, getting Minka Fitzpatrick, who at one point was one of the best safeties in the NFL. But as Minka Fitzpatrick has gotten older, it just hasn't seemed to have worked out for him the past few years in the new environment. So the Dolphins have traded Minka Fitzpatrick to the Jets for a seventh-round pick, which kind of tells you how the NFL values Minka Fitzpatrick at this point, going from one of the best safeties in the NFL to basically being a seventh-round pick worth player. So it's kind of sad to see how his career has gone down since then. But he had a really good run. And now he goes to the Jets, which, like I said earlier, the Jets are not going to be doing too much this upcoming season, I believe. But, they got a couple veteran additions that are going to be coming back to the Jets and, might be changing the culture, might be changing the locker room more than, the actual performance on the field and whatnot. But the Jets are in bad need of basically everything, but one of their bigger needs is defensive back. They need help at the defensive back position, whether it's corner or safety. Fun fact for you, the Jets had 0 interceptions last season. 0. So, yeah, somebody needs to be coming over to the Jets and helping out their backfield, and getting Minka Fitzpatrick is a good step in the right direction for them. So maybe the Jets will perform a little bit better on the field next season, but I think the number one overall pick is not out of question for them at all.